G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute. Today I'm joined by AstroPub, Osiris Frost, and Algared. Now these boys don't know this, but I actually divided us into the left progressive, nice and neat casual people and the conservative uptight people on the right. No, that's a bit of a joke, but that's...
He means the awesome people and the slobs.
See, that's
Yes.
what the uptight people always say. Anyway, so today we're going to be doing a buyer's guide on the Prowler, and I think it's very safe to say here at the Inforunners it's a very popular ship. Literally all of us wanted to be on this show. Sirius are actually currently moving house, so he hasn't been able to make it, and it's just Dyson's got a lot of study at the moment, and he did really want to be here, so we'll try and pass on some of the notes that those guys have passed through throughout the episode as well. So if you like this content, please leave a like, subscribe. We read every comment and we try to get back to as many as we possible. And if you also want to go the extra mile, consider backing us on Patreon. Now the business out of the way, I think I'll just go around the room, so to speak, and I'll start with Paul. Can you give us, Paul, what you think of this ship aesthetically? Like the looks of it? Yeah, that's the word. Not slipping off my tongue today.
It's the first Tevarin ship we've had in game. It looks great. It's unique enough that it does. It's still close enough to human that you could recognize it as a ship, but it's unique enough that it's different. I like the different quantum drive signature. It looks really cool. Very Doctor Who, but it falls into the pattern of every alien, every different species has a different quantum drive look, which I like. It looks mean, it looks bad, and it's a space osprey. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. Algared, tell us what you were talking about the view from the above the other day. I actually think that's very interesting.
Yep. Well, I'm going to gush and wax lyrical on this ship because I absolutely love it. I loved it when it first came out. I love the look of it. The only thing I didn't like when it first came out was that tail section. To me, when you looked at it, it looked like the insect, the silverfish. And to me, it just took away that awesome, scary feature of a ship. But now when I look at it like that, it just reminds me of a paratrooper who's jumped out of a plane, and you look at him silently coming in and free falling.
I actually think that paratrooper thing actually almost goes with the SEAL Team 6 type of feel of this ship as well, so it's got some merit.
Yeah, so, and I think that's what they've tried to pick up, but I just love the look of a ship. It's the nose gives it that Romulan Warboard feel. It's got that real aggressive look. It's Tevarin. What's not to love?
Cyrus, your thoughts?
This thing looks great, especially when it's flying. It's very nimble, and it looks like a bird of prey swooping down on something that unfortunately doesn't see it coming, and it's about to kill it. I love the look inside and outside, but if this is a little bit nitpicky, but I wish that the paint job was a little bit darker. That's really the only thing I could say that I would change.
I myself think they really nailed the original concept externally, and I think they've done a lot of work on the inside. I like the kind of bird 3D print aesthetic. Initially, I kind of had the concern of the red because it is a little bit like the Van Dool. I know Dyson shared with me that he thought it had something to do with I'm trying to think what he said.
Ruining
night vision and stuff. Apparently, it's better for night vision to have red and stuff. So yeah, yeah. But I really do like this ship, and I think the Tevarin stuff will ring true as we get more and more of them coming into the verse, and I'd like to see some of that tech carry forward. And we do know that the vision tech for the cockpits is going to be on other Tevarin ships, and I think a lot of people are very popular with that. All right, so we'll move on to the next bit here. I've got in my notes is stealth. I did some tests with one of our Discord people, Sandig, one of the guys that's on our Discord, and we actually took the Valkyrie, all the Vanguards, and the Prowler, and we literally tested the different components in each other, and I can tell you now, at the moment in the game, components are what drive 100% what a ship is. There's no extra stuff. So if you take the very slow stealth drive out of this, which takes 28 seconds from when you press B to when it actually enters warp, you can put that on any other ships and they act exactly the same way. This is kind of a question I will hand on to you guys as you tell me about what you like about the stealth in this ship. Do you think that it should remain component driven, or do you think the ship itself should have some kind of element to it as well that affects the components in a unique way. Almost like each ship has its own component that is exclusive to it, that's internalized. Or do you think they should all be 100% component driven? I'll pass that on to you guys. So yeah, we'll start down the end this time. So Algared, tell me about your stuff with stealth in this ship.
Well, I think a bit of both. You want your components to be a real driving force in terms of what the ships can do, because that enables you to mix and match and gives you the ability to play the game the way you want to play. But you also want the ships themselves to actually have an innate characteristic. So you want a ship that is specifically built for stealth to actually have something in its framework that actually adds a little bit to that. And I think that will be something that comes through. I think it's in the same way that we see armor. Will be something that comes in on ships. Ships that have heavier armor will be able to take a beating more than ships that don't have armor. So yeah, I think it has to be part of that. But I think certainly the way the components work has to be also the way the game works.
Osiris, your thoughts on stealth?
I agree with Algared. It's got to be a little of both. I think there's a role to play for emissions-based stealth with the components, obviously. But if you think about modern stealthcraft, there's also things like the cross-section of the ship, and I think that some stealthcraft have radar scattering or absorbing paint on them as well, and those could be. I don't know if you would consider that a component or something different, but I think that the shape and the finish of a ship should play into it as well.
I think you've kind of hit on a point there that a lot of people overlook. Yeah, there's going to be many different types of stealth. Paul, your thoughts?
I'm just going to pile in with all the other ones.
Yep.
It has to be part. It has to be part the frame and part the components. You can't have both. It's the only way you can have ships like the Prowler or the Eclipse or the Saber be able to have some sort of stealth effectiveness without having to go pure stealth in the components. Like the Hornet Ghost would be stupid without it being able to have some natural stealth abilities that you don't have to buy extra stuff for.
I think that I'm probably going to negate my own earlier comment. Now I've listened to all yours, but I do think there are some other things that the ship builds brings to that are unique. So it's not just a component thing that makes them unique. And one of those, for example, on this ship is the air shields, and a lot like with we ourselves, as well as other YouTubers and creators that I've listened to, have often tried to compare this ship to the Valkyrie as an example. And one that Algared and I have come up with is, say you were to go onto another planet and that planet doesn't have oxygen, the Prowler is going to have a distinct advantage over a ship like the Valkyrie, because as soon as you open the Valkyrie into that atmosphere, everyone's going to have their helmet on. In this, though, the air shields will actually keep the atmosphere out of the ship. So I find that really kind of interesting. Is there any other unique abilities or things that you guys would like to comment on the air shield? So I'll start with Osiris in the middle.
I not really. I mean, other than this thing is just from the design, it's much more, I think, focused and purpose built of a dropship. It's obviously intended to work in vacuum for the reasons that you just mentioned above.
What about some benefits of the air shields then? Like, what use cases would you see for them?
I think that So this one of the functions of this ship that we originally pitched on was the idea that you would use it in boarding actions, right? You fly up close to an enemy ship, and if you have your doors already open, that's one less step. You can get in really quick. Your troops can just shoot right out the holes. It's more efficient.
I think, well, another thing Algared and I talked about, and I'll probably let Algared talk about it a little bit here, but Algared, talk about how we were showing what the air shield signifies the Prowler is, as in, space versus land. So I'll let you talk a bit, Algared.
Well, it really picks up what Osiris was just saying. The fact that the air shields are there does mean that the ship is a ship for using in no atmosphere. It's a ship that enables you to get up close to another ship and open up. We know from the lore that the air shields do seem to be very power hungry, and that's why we don't see them being used in the UEE apart from on space stations. Or on the big capital ships. Whereas, and that's probably on this ship will be a downside, having the air shields drawing so much power. But again, it makes the ship unique, and it really gives it an edge over a Valkyrie or even a Vanguard. And certainly those doors on the side, which enable you to get all your crew out at different points, again gives it that edge over the Vanguard hoplite.
Paul, your thought on the air shields? Thanks, bud.
All of you.
I've always said that the best dropship and best ship for like just general like utility in space is the Cutlass, and the reason why is because it has 2 doors that just open up and let you get in and out really easily.
Mhm.
Basically, the Prowler does the same thing, but it has air shields. So instead of having to basically vacate your air every time, you have the ability to get people out, get people back in. And when you have those doors already open and you don't have to have people have their helmets on, they can have their helmets off. Especially if there's like injuries or if they want to preserve oxygen as much as possible. They have their helmets off, wait for the absolute last moment, pop their helmets on, go out. Now they've got that extra 30, 40 minutes of oxygen that they can use, or whatever long it took you to get there, that you can use in combat. You don't have to worry about in there. Whereas the Valkyrie, you got to space the whole thing in order to do it. Valkyrie is it's a combat drop ship. It's designed to drop things onto planets, whereas this because of the air shields is designed to be used anywhere, especially in space.
Quick follow-up question then, Paul. Does that mean you think that this ship will be very tailored towards pirates or piracy?
No, I think it would help with piracy, but I think it's definitely going to be tailored towards more small teams.
Agreed.
Whereas the something like the hoplite would be designed for small teams, but in a larger combat zone. So like multiple ships flying around, the hoplite drops it off and then it becomes a fighter, a support ship. This is designed to go in alone with not a lot of support, drop things off and leave. So it's those air shields just allow for that just a little bit more edge in combat. And in terms of gameplay, that means that you don't have to bring as much supplies. And when we start having to have things like gas, like pay attention to how much oxygen you have in your suit or how much atmosphere you have in your suit, that's going to matter. That's going to matter. Those extra minutes are going to matter, especially in a vacuum or in a place where you don't have oxygen. So
it also comes up with what we were talking about earlier, Paul, with the history of the ship, where we were talking about the role of the little ship for inserting Marines in the Instrument of Surrender, and we were speculating that this was originally kind of that ship, but it's kind of grown from what that story had. But it's that idea: get the troops into the enemy ship so they can sabotage and cause mayhem and
I think in
do what they do.
One of the Q&As, that literally the way they described this ship was go in silent, come out loud. And I think that the ship kind of does carry that with the armor and the stealth. A lot of other stealth ships just don't have the armor. I'm going to combine some of the ones we've got here. So there was a very unique cockpit experience with this ship. The phallic shields and the Grav-lev plates. They're probably 3 defining factors of this ship, and probably will carry on to some of the other. We know, for example, the cockpit is going to carry on to other Tevarin ships. Tell me why you think that they make a good addition to this ship. So I'll start with you, Paul. So the things like the cockpit, the phallic shield, and the Grav-lev plates, what do you see those being used for, and your likes and dislikes of those?
I like the cockpit because it screams anti-EMP kind of thing. I'd like to see it more in other ships like the 890 with its battle bridge. I'd like to see it in other ships in general, like the Valkyrie or the Carrack.
Sorry to interrupt. You said anti-EMP?
Anti-EMP.
Yeah, but if you got EMP'd, wouldn't that turn the screen off?
Well, it depends, because if you're in the hardened area in the center of a ship, like the battle bridge in the 890, you wouldn't need you would be able to still be able to see, and you wouldn't be as vulnerable to it.
Okay.
Or it could be more vulnerable to EMPs as well. Like right now, if you hit it with an EMP, it turns off. All of the things turn off.
Yeah.
So I think that may also be another thing is the EMP itself could be dangerous. But and in terms of the phalanx shields, I like the idea of the phalanx shields. I believe the way that they did them works, because if I remember correctly, and I may be wrong with this one, is that phalanx shields are when you hit them, all of the shields drain. So in order to take down the shields, instead of taking down one side of the shield, you have to essentially pull power, because it pulls power from the other shields to block that. So if the front shield's taking damage, then all the other shields are taking damage as well, but they're also sharing the power. So they're tougher and harder to take down. But once they're down, it means it's harder to pull back up.
That's different from
It's a great way of
different from what I remember hearing. I thought you had to point the shield physically where you wanted it to be. It was an actual, like, you could move it. So my thought it would probably be tied to the movement of the turret. So if you're shooting at something and it's shooting at you, that's what actually protects the ship. And I know the Defender has the same thing as well.
Yeah.
So the literally gives a more detailed role to the co-pilot or the assistant pilot to actually protect the ship.
Yeah, I believe there is some aspect of that where you can like harden it and it will like become nearly impenetrable in that direction for a little bit longer. But I don't know about the direction.
I think that's temporary, and I think when the actual proper phallic shields come in, they're actually meant to be directional. It is in the original Q&A, but again, a lot of time has passed. It might have changed.
Yeah,
it is also.
Yep.
It is also in the lore that the phallic shield was that movable thing that gets shifted. Again, in the story Instrument of Surrender, the Tevarin ship was shifting its shield to block either the asteroids that they were going through or the fire from the UEE ship they were fighting. So it really does give that idea. And I have a feeling that hardening aspect that we've got is kind of in lieu of that ability to move the shields. I had heard that every ship could kind of do that hardening, but
they
the
all can.
Banu ships actually had that by nature. The Defender had that by nature, but it automatically stopped ballistics and energy weapons by default, and that was that kind of putting in that difference between the phalanx shield and regular shields. Again, once they drain, it certainly takes a longer time for them to power up again.
Yeah. As for the Grav-lev plates, I like the idea, but to me, it feels like a bygone era. It feels like a bygone era. So, like, for instance, you wouldn't want to put this up against a Nova. You wouldn't want to put this up against a Ballista. You wouldn't want to put it up against probably a couple dudes with a rocket launcher, because it's not exactly the best. It's a huge ship to be used as a ground vehicle. And it doesn't have that. It has a lot of firepower, but doesn't have a ton. So it feels like, I like the idea that it gives us a little bit of a history. Now, I don't know if the grav plates will survive or they'll add it to it, because I don't think it's in there right now. I think that's the plan in the future. But it feels like one of those things where it was being added, or like back in the day, it was used because it was like, hey, we already have a cargo ship, or like a drop ship. Let's turn it into a troop transport as well on the ground, so we don't have to use as much power and still get our troops from A to B. Very utilitarian and very Tevarin, which I like.
I do want to give Osiris a chance to speak, but I do have to ask this question because I've had a lot of people talk about the grav plates and using this like a vehicle. Now, to me, I think of the Dragonfly, so this would act like a bigger Dragonfly. I think the Grav-levs are probably more to get the ship into a better place to drop people off. So I'm thinking like a tunnel or something like that. And if you are using this like a floating Dragonfly APC, you wouldn't really get much of a chance to use the bigger guns on it, because it would be you think about when the flight mechanics come back in, I think it'll be a lot harder to actually try and slowly rotate the ship, where the turret I think will be the main gun when you try and use this like a Grav-lev vehicle. You guys can correct me if you think you're wrong, but I will pass it off to Osiris because he has to give us his opinions.
Well, I think where the common denominator here is, and Paul and Algared just kind of alluded to this, that this is more like a special operations dropship than the Valkyrie, which is a standard combined arms warfare. And this is about stealthy infiltration. And then once you blow something up, everybody's going to know you're there, and you're going to have to get the hell out as quickly as you can. So I think the Grav-lev plates are going to really facilitate this thing coming in, hovering, not having to engage landing mode, and using that top turret to lay down covering fire while the troops reload the ship, and then it just takes off. It doesn't have to retract its landing gear, and it's gone.
To add to what you've just said there, you're actually one of the only military people here today, sorry, so I'll actually ask that. Would you see this as the first, like, I know you'd go in with Valkyries and this, and you'd go in a big force, but this would probably be like the first strike craft as you're trying to do that ground strike? Is that what you would see this as? And then, you get, after the first hit and everyone's like, oh shit, that's when the Valkyries would come in after and drop off all the vehicles and stuff. Is that how
Yeah.
what you're kind of saying? Okay.
Yeah, well, this is generalizing to a degree, but in modern warfare, you usually send in special operations forces in advance of conventional troops. They would hit critical targets like anti-aircraft emplacements and things like that, and then that would kind of make inserting conventional troops a safer undertaking.
So just to play devil's advocate, this might be the ship that goes in and turns off the shields so the rest of the ships can come in and wreak havoc.
Yeah, things along
okay.
those lines.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's kind of wrapped up most of the other stuff I want to talk about. Unless you guys have got some stuff you want to add to that. Do you want to talk about components, or do you want to go on to our recommendations for who this ship is for? Algared?
Well, I was going to talk about the grav plates a little bit because
sorry. Go ahead.
I really do think that what we see here is the old tech. Again, when we were talking earlier,
Yes.
Paul reminded us that the date. This is a 500-year-old ship. It predates the Mesa period. It was in the First Tevarin War and the Second Tevarin War. And in the Second Tevarin War, when the Nova tank is brought on the scene, we have the lore story of the Nova tanks holding Korea Pass against Tevarin attempting to break through. And the Tevarin would have been using their dropships. And I imagine from that story that they were using the dropships like tanks, and the Nova tanks just absolutely obliterated them. Again, it's not a ship for taking on heavy armor. It's a ship that you could press into service as a tank or as a APC. So it'll take out your
troops,
your Ursus. It'll take out your Tumbril Rovers, but it won't take out a Nova tank. And I think that's where you've got, if you're thinking of using it in that regard, in that capacity, you're going to be undone, I think.
And I think it'll be the cool part about it is you brought up the one thing you did bring up there, Execute, about the flight model. I feel like instead of hovering and using a lot of fuel to hover, the grav mode might be a way of preventing it from using fuel. So it just uses power, so it's able to hover and stay in one place without having to expend fuel, which allows it to, as you said, hover over the ground, drop off troops, stay there for longer, so it can loiter in the area for a little bit longer, and then pick up troops as it comes out without having to turn off its systems to conserve fuel, which is a great little thing.
A long time ago, I think it was Algared I was speaking to, we actually speculated what would this ship be like turning the power off and just falling in atmosphere and literally just turning just the Grav-lev on and literally landing like on a cushion of air on the Grav-lev. Like, could that possibly be... I'm not sure the ship could do it anymore. But wouldn't that be amazing if it could? Like, you literally just silently drop into atmosphere and just land on a Grav-lev.
Dragonflies do that right now. I mean, that's just a quirk of the physics, but yeah.
So if you can pull that off, just how stealthy is this ship going to be? Like, if it's turned off, that's pretty stealthy.
And I find that amazing because we're already hearing people complain, the ship's not stealthy enough.
Yeah, so... and one thing I'll say from the testing that we did with the components is one of the really interesting things about this ship with the current default drive is how long it takes to spin up. It's also mirrored on the other side of how long it takes to spin down. So you actually come out of warp way further out from your location than other ones. So think about how that's going to be a lot harder to pick up. The different signatures and stuff like that. So I actually think the stealth components will... I don't know about required, but I think they're not even the highest grade stealth components. So if you can go higher, then definitely from what, just calculating what Algared said, you could make this ship even more stealthy. I guess we'll move on.
I'll give a brief overview for the buyer's guide, just for those who want to know the current grade, the components on the standard ship is garbage. Don't use them. You're going to have to upgrade them. They're just too low grade to be good for any kind of use.
Yeah, they're C grade, so they're the middle of a road in stealth. So you got A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
So
the coolers are not very good. The shield's not very good. Like you're not looking at very good components.
And also, if you're like just looking at how the game is now, stealth's not a big thing at the moment. So everyone's chucking in, I think it's the X1 propulsion drive, just so they can normally transfer. But I think the stealth drives will come back around in the distance of time. So I guess we'll go on to our recommendations then. I think it's pretty obvious by the fact that every Inforunner kind of wanted to be on the show what we think of this ship. But I do want to play
Don't buy it.
Yeah, don't buy it. And that's that. I also want to talk about the price a little bit when you factor that into your recommendations. So I'm going to play devil's advocate first, and I've probably mentioned this a few times before. I do think this ship is very overpriced for what it is. I also think that's kind of reflected in what CIG have done in regards to the war bond that's available at the moment. That actually dropped the price under what the original concept was, which is kind of strange. I think the original concept was after the concept, so it was $380 at concept. You can now get it for $390, and then it went to $425. So you can actually get it cheaper than the original $425 price, which is kind of interesting. And so the actual ship with credits at the moment's only gone up by $15, which is quite small considering the next closest ship to it is the Reclaimer, and the Reclaimer went up $50 from $350 to $400. So I'll pass it off to Paul. We'll just go along. Paul, tell us your thoughts on what you recommend of the ship, and I also want you to factor in the price for me there if you can.
All right. So how to put this? If you want a dropship because you want to be Foehammer from Halo, don't buy the ship, buy the Valkyrie.
Yep.
If you want a dropship that is also a combat ship, buy the Hoplite. It's cheaper.
Yep.
If you want a stealth dropship that has decent combat capabilities, then I would recommend it, but you have to have deep pockets. This is not your casual. This is kind of almost, I would say, almost end game level dropship kind of thing. Because to be a pilot for this ship, you need to be able to A, fly well, B, know how to use stealth technology, do stealth pretty well, C, know how to fly without getting your passengers killed, D, get out without getting killed, and E, come back and pick up your targets. And I don't know if I did alphabet right, but pick up your targets and get them out. You need. There's so many different factors in this. Whereas a Valkyrie is just go in, drop things off, fly away, repeat. You don't really have to worry about just try not to get shot down. There's a lot more nuance to the Prowler, so it requires a very specific pilot for a very specific job, and as a result, if you really want to do that, which is not in the game yet, just wait till it comes into the game and buy it in game, because it's really expensive.
So Paul,
for what it is.
So in a generalized way, you're saying it's a very niche dropship. It's the niche man's dropship. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I would say it's more than the niche man's. I believe it's an end game dropship. It's a kind of a dropship you won't need until you have massive orgs fighting one another, kind of thing.
I wish I'd added this to what I said, but I do find it favors those that are really into the first person. It's the person that likes first person gameplay. It's their ship, believe it or not. That's the correlation I really see. So if you're a really good first person shooter player, I'd say this is the ship. If you were going to get a ship, this would be the one, but it is very expensive for what it is. And you obviously need friends that want to play that as well. Osiris, your recommendations, please.
Well, everybody knows this is a really overpriced ship, right? That's the first, second, third thing everybody who's a content creator and Star Citizen has ever said about it. But think about expensive compared to what? And as Execute said a minute ago, the War Bond version of this thing is now only $20 more than a Valkyrie. And add to that the thing that CIG seems to be doing now with all the new sales, which is they're introducing a reduced War Bond price to try to get more money in. And if you arbitrage that correctly, you can actually get right now, you can get like a Valkyrie to Prowler CCU for $20 War Bond if you don't mind spending new money. And then you can think about what ships under $395 are coming into the game in the foreseeable future. Ships like the Mercury Star Runners coming out, you might be able to save $15 there. The other Crusader ship, the Hercules, is coming out in the foreseeable future. So you could probably get this thing for around $350 if you played your cards right. And then this whole idea of the Prowler is just too expensive to be worth it is kind of out the window at that point.
Yeah, I do think I probably should have agree with you and kind of say, but if you also add the alien tax, which none of us kind of agree with, but it is just a thing the CIG do, that kind of does give more validity to what you've just said. That's very cheap alien tax at $20. So, yeah.
So as far as who it's for, I'll agree with Paul that it's a very select audience of people who are going to want to consider owning the ship. I think it's for people who are really into infiltration sort of gameplay, and that's a very nebulous concept, and you're going to have to apply your imagination right now because there is very little that currently exists in terms of FPS gameplay. So this is going to be more like probably PvP way down the road when people have bases,
Yeah.
So just kind of use your imagination about how this sort of ship can be applied to that type of gameplay. I think that pirates and people who are interested in boarding actions like military special forces type players are going to benefit from this ship more so than the Valkyrie or the Vanguard dropship.
That's a really important point you've kind of hit on there, Osiris, the kind of now gameplay versus the future gameplay. There's not a lot in the game for this ship at the moment, unless you're in a group like, say, someone like Rexzilla who does all that type of thing. I do agree, though, down the line, this ship will have its place. Algared, your closing thoughts.
Again, I agree with Paul and Osiris in terms of this ship is the end game ship. I'm not even going to talk about the expense. We already know that. It's deadly for an Australian at the moment.
It's about $500 for us. It's or more actually, isn't it? It's quite expensive for us at the moment.
But in terms of the gameplay, this is quite unique. It's more unique than both the Valkyrie and the Hoplite, and it does that because of those feathers on those wings. Now, when they first brought out the ship with the feathers on it, I used to think, well, they're nice. It makes it look Tevarin, but they've got no use. But they actually made it so they're actually armored walls when it's down and landed. That actually means this is probably the only dropship that can actually take troops back under fire and get them in safely. And that gives it an edge over the other ships that is just not there. The heavy armor of a ship means it can actually take that fire as it's taking them off, and again that gives it an edge over the other ships. I agree with Paul. It's certainly your end game ship. It's your end game dropship. It's the top of the line, fancy dancy stealth armor, good weapons, and the largest troop complement. So yeah,
that's true. You've all hit on some very, very clear and very important points there. I hope if you guys end up picking up one of these ships, you take those into account. And if you have picked up one of these, let us know the type of gameplay you're expecting to come off with it. I've heard some strange things about this ship over my time, and I've found people that have it and they've brought it because it looks really cool. And I often find because it's overpriced, they're not going to be using it for what they want to use it for. But yeah, I'd like to hear from you guys in the comments what you actually think of this ship. I think we all safely say it's overpriced, but as Osiris keenly pointed out, you can get it cheaper, and it even if like one of the things I've looked at doing is actually picking up a CCU just so I can turn it into a ship above and save a little bit of money because of that war bond. So there are some interesting little tricks you can do there for CCUs. Is there anything else you guys would like to add before we close up?
More Tevarin ships, please.
Yes,
yep.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Like the first one, want to see more.
That's probably why I've got the ship. It's Tevarin.
All right then. He's been Algared. He's been Osiris Frost. That's been AstroPub. They've been the conservatives. We've been the progressives. And we'll see you guys next time. I'm joking. Sorry, I had to do it. They just
Lower
so
taxes.
dressed up.
Did you just assume my
Lower the alien
politics?
Yeah.
All right. We'll catch
Take
you guys
care.
next time.
Be well. God bless.
See you later.
Stay safe.
That's very important in these times.